Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Thursday afternoon briefing with myself, joined by Craig Nisbet to discuss all the latest from Easter Road, building into Sunday's Premier Sports Cup tie against Celtic at Celtic Park. Craig, thanks as always for joining us. How are you getting on?
I'm not too bad. Looking forward to getting into a good chat today.
Good man, good man. Well, we'll start with today's news. Obviously, the confirmation today, it's been kind of in the works for a few days. We can expect it to go through, sorry. Dylan Vente off back a loan deal to the Netherlands. What's your reaction? I think it's kind of fair to say it's not through lack of trying. I don't think you can ever doubt his effort, and I think if anything, you could probably say that he ran about a bit too much at times, Dylan Vente. But it's not really worked out for him at Hibs, and I don't know about you, but for me, a lot of the time he's looked like a guy who was sort of carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. So it sounds like as much as it's disappointing, obviously from his point of view, probably from David Gray's point of view and the club's point of view in terms of their investment, that he's going away on loan so soon into his Hibs career. But it does seem like it's probably the best move for everybody at this point in time.
Yeah, I think for most Hibs fans, it was one that everyone was desperate to see do well. I mean, you want all the players to do well, but he was somebody that just with his effort out on the pitch, you were kind of willing him to go on, and it's a shame because I think certainly in pre-season, he's had that classic thing that happens to strikers where he's actually getting in the right places and the right spaces at times. The ball's just not going in the back of the net for him. And, he obviously got that hat trick early on in pre-season and things were looking really positive. And then there's been a couple of missed chances. And I think you're right. When he's on the pitch, he's running around. He tries to press really effectively, but quite often he can then just looks like he just tires himself out, and around about the 65th minute mark, you can tell he's flagging, and that might be from the injury last season, which obviously didn't help. But I would just, because it's been such a crazy time at Hibs the last wee while, I forgot that he was a Lee Johnson signing, and he came in, and then Johnson was away after a few games, and then it was Montgomery, and there was the change in shape. And I think we spoke about a couple of players who have maybe should have been afforded or should be still afforded a little bit more time to settle, because the club's been a bit all over the place, and they've maybe signed up for something that's not there. So I think I read David Gray's comments, and it seems like he's very well thought of, and he's a good guy. He's very professional, and you can imagine that. So I think it's a no-brainer for Hibs on this one to let him go back to the Netherlands, play in the top division, hopefully bang in some goals, get his confidence back. And then I suppose at the end of the season, for being honest, there's two ways: you bring him back and hopefully bed him back into the team, or you try and recoup the money you've spent and maybe try and make a profit.
Yeah, it's probably going to go one of those two ways, and we obviously do wish him well over there. But I mean, just going back to that at the very start, he did have that period where he looked as though in those early days that it might click for him. I can't remember exactly the number, but was it not something like he scored from 5 consecutive shots on target? So you're kind of thinking, well, this guy seems to know where the goal is, but it's just. Again, there's several factors that have kind of influenced it since then. But when you do think back to that time, it did look as though Hibs had made a good signing at that point.
Yeah, it's funny because when you look back, he scored goals that he never ever looked like he really cleanly connected with a strike. It was always his finishes were quite odd, I always thought. But you're right, when he first came in, he was he had that record at the beginning. I actually think I've only ever went one podcast without mentioning Le Fondre, so I'm embarrassed to be bringing him up again. But I think when Montgomery played that 4-4-2 shape, you could tell that he was crying out for somebody to play alongside him or play behind him that's effective. And I think you can see that we've struggled with that number 10 position as you can see what the moves we're trying to make in the transfer window. So I did always feel for Vente that he had like quite odd combinations of people playing with him. It was never consistent. The team changed a lot. And I think he just became victim of that. And Hibs, we struggled to score goals in that second part of the season. We've spoken before about no big marquee wins and loads of goals going in. It was scoring 1 or 2 goals and things like that. So I just don't think it worked out. From then, he obviously picked up an injury and it kept him out. I'm sure at the beginning they sort of made it out like the club, he was going to be back sooner than he was, and he
I
kept
remember that.
playing, and then he's obviously rebuilding his fitness and the confidence. Plus, moving to a different country and settling in and things like that. So, yeah, I think it's just a lot of factors have come against him. It's just not quite clicked. But, he's certainly somebody you hope that goes away, scores goals. And, I think most Hibs fans would like to see him back and hopefully doing well for us in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably too early to write him off completely at this point. But just in the here and now, would you now feel a bit more comfortable about things moving forward if Hibs were to go out and bring in another body for that area?
I think so. I think that's going to be really important. And I know there's there's other positions. I mean, we've strengthened pretty well over the last couple of weeks, but I don't think you can afford to go into the season just with Kurevich and Bowie. Kurevich's fitness is, often a question, and I know he has been fit for a while, but it's match fitness and it's game speed and getting up to that, which is a different thing. And obviously, Bowie's cameo was against Celtic was one of the only positives really to take from the game, and it looks like he can put himself about and pace, power, and good shot on him and things like that as well. But the last thing we want to do is go into a season relying on someone like that, just who's not played. He's played a lot of games down south in the lower leagues, but I think it's quite a big jump to then lead the line every week. So I do think we need a striker in, and preferably, and it's a hard age bracket to go, but you probably want somebody with a bit of experience, as well, that knows their way about, who's comfortable leading the line. And can obviously help, because Kurevich is young, Bowie's young, to be able to support them as well. So it actually weirdly becomes like quite a big signing, I think, and quite an important one, because, which is quite an odd thing, because I don't think we've really been talking much about the striker position, but now that Vente goes, it's like actually we really do need to get this one right.
Yeah, you don't know any veteran strikers that might be able to be picked up, maybe from down south, or no?
Listen, no, I don't know, but no, and that's where at the start of the season there was all the links with Simon Murray, and I know it kind of split the fans to a certain extent about him coming back, but someone that knows the league well as well, and won't need too much time to acclimatise. You do need somebody in that vein, which will be difficult. It does maybe depend on how Gray wants to play as well. You might not be relying on having 2 forwards, so maybe rotating one. But I just think with no other third striker, and obviously the inexperience of Bowie, and same with Kurevich as well, I think we do need another body in there.
Yeah, it would certainly make sense. I think I totally agree with you there. But I mean, so it's 9 signings so far. The latest of those came in this week. Hibs have signed Kwon on loan from Celtic for the rest of the season. So I mean, it's probably been in the works for a wee while, that one. But I think it kind of looks, in response to the weekend, because like all of anybody was talking about after the Celtic game was midfield. I suppose to an extent it's St Mirren game as well. Midfield, we need another body. We need a different profile in midfield. Somebody who can bring a bit of maybe, what Kwon is obviously been brought in to bring, 6'4" defensive midfielder by trade, gets about the pitch, comfortable on the ball as well. Actually had a really good game against Hibs last season, and that is one of those games we try not to mention, because I remember we discussed it to absolute death at the time, as of course when St Mirren rocked up to Easter Road and gave Nick Montgomery's Hibs a 3-0 chasing. Probably the worst 45. Well, maybe the Aberdeen game was up there, but certainly that first 45 minutes was up there. But within that now, you kind of look at it, and if you were to watch Kwon's performance during that game, you would come away from it thinking, well, that is the kind of player that you think would do well in this Hibs team, because we've talked about bringing some balance and different profiles to midfield that will not just kind of, it can benefit the other guys in there as well. By you talked, I think it's yourselves maybe talked about Joe Newell trying to do a bit of everything at times. Can maybe free up guys to maybe do what they're good at, take responsibilities away from them. So I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at him at all, but I mean, certainly on paper, it looks like the kind of midfielder that David Gray's been missing. Obviously, we'll need to wait and see how it pans out, but certainly on paper looks to be promising. And obviously, the fact that Celtic paid money for him as well, and he's done well at St Mirren, suggests that he should be able to come and make an impact, you'd think.
Yeah, I think so. That was probably one of his best performances, I think, against Hibs in that game. And after that, it was sort of mixed. They had 60 minutes here, 45 there, and towards the end of the season, found himself on the bench. But we can see like St Mirren have got a decent midfield. It's like a well organised midfield and good players in there. So I think he's ideal. He's got a decent bit of league experience. He's obviously not played for Celtic, but trained, obviously not like a sort of league games and stuff like that, but he's been away with them pre-season, he's trained. So he should be able to come in and get up to speed. And I think it goes back to what we've said for a number of positions, it's competition, but it's actually realistic competition. Like when you described him there, that's, I'm sure, what we were sold for Kenna when he was signed. Yeah. 6'4", good around the pitch, good in the ball. And, again, we could get into why that's maybe not worked out, but at least with this signing of Kwon, we at least can go, right, well, the thought process behind it is he's got league experience. We know he can do it at this level. He can come in and create realistic competition. And that for me is a good signing and a bit of a no-brainer for us. And I think you're right for Newell. It's we've talked a lot about this like pivot player, the number 6, and how we get it and how we get it right and who plays there and things like that. And we've just struggled with that. So Newell's kind of had to just take that on board and be the one to kind of do that. I know Levitt's had moments in there as well.
Yeah.
But you could see from the game on Sunday there that, there needs to be an extra body in there because we've just not been able to get that area right for a while. So hopefully he can come in, create a bit of competition. It means we can maybe push Newell into a different position, maybe a bit further up and things like that. So it just gives us an extra, more like realistic option in the centre of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, he's cup tied. Well, not cup tied, sorry. He can't play against his parent club this weekend when Hibs go to Celtic Park. So just on that game, it's obviously it's a tall order for Hibs, especially when you see how the game panned out last weekend. Celtic, very good. Hibs, still not quite there, shall we say. So, I mean, heading into that, you obviously looked at the game, watched it back. Anybody who follows Craig on Twitter at 9125 Analysis will have seen the clips and the pieces of the game that he picked out where Celtic were able to gain the upper hand and basically dominate. And it's obviously no surprise that a lot of that did come through the middle of the park. So, I mean, we'll go on to Sunday's game, but just to maybe recap, or for anybody who hasn't seen that yet, like, just what were your kind of main takeaways from Sunday in terms of how Celtic managed to get the upper hand through the middle of the park and then into the final third as well?
Yeah, I think, since Postecoglou and he came in and it was obviously a completely different sort of style they were playing and something like quite modern, I suppose, for the Scottish leagues. And you could see, when he was in charge, they were very, very challenging to play against and they were really direct. And I think under Rodgers, they've still retained a lot of the similar moves and similar principles of play under Postecoglou, but they move, they keep possession of the ball. They're not as direct as they previously were. So they're quite formidable in that sense because they can go quickly at you or they can just keep the ball moving and almost like pass you to death. So it was always going to be a tall order, as you said. I do think, before we get into anything tactical, when you lose a goal after 2 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes, that, all the plans kind of go out the window a little bit. And I think it takes a team who aren't as fragile as where we are at the moment to be able to kind of dust themselves down and go, no, we stick to the plan. Let's not panic. It's early in the game. And I think that first, I was very fearful, like that 20 minutes. I thought it could have been a real hiding. And I think Celtic kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit and potentially got a little bit sloppier. upped our game a lot as well, and you know, maybe things leveled out from there. But yeah, you know, I said in my videos, they pin the fullbacks. You know, the wingers go wide and they try and pin the fullbacks as wide as they can. Obviously, Kyogo just operates in between the centre halves to kind of stop them from going across the cover. And then in the middle of the park, obviously, you've got, you know, McGregor dropping deep to look to get on the ball, and it was Hatate and O'Reilly who then push up into those horrible little pockets of space that kind of operate between the defence and the midfield, where you could pass them to a centre half, the midfielder could stay with them, but then it just creates this big open space in the middle of the park. And then, of course, more so on the left-hand side, Greg Taylor would sometimes come in and they would have like an inverted fullback, so an extra body in the middle. And it's really difficult to play against it. I think I said in one of my videos, it's easy to sit watching the game in hindsight and sitting with a tactics board and saying, oh, just do this, do that. It is very difficult. But in terms of like communication and rotations and things like that, there was definitely improvement in the second half and how we dealt with it. And that should, hopefully, I'm sure on the training pitch this week, they've been looking at that and working on that. And you obviously did a bit of a breakdown on a couple of the goals and the things you see. They'll be going through that. And I said in my videos, it's a choice between, if they do go out in the same shape as they set up, it's about personnel and who plays in that. I think I said that I've been asking for, well, some fans, you know, about Dylan Levitt playing as a 10 and playing further up the pitch. That's not the game to do that, I don't think. And Campbell playing in beside Newell just didn't work at all. And we actually looked a lot more settled when Campbell and Levitt switched.
Yep.
And I think, you know, I think the rationale behind it would be, if we did you know, Campbell can cover the ground a bit more, and you know, if you know, I can kind of understand why you'd maybe want him in that position but it just didn't work, and it just meant I thought we looked a little bit disjointed, and Kurevich, you know, was just running shuttles really around, not able to get on the ball. Levitt wasn't really quick enough across, and it just became really easy, and we played quite a high line as well, which I didn't really understand what we were trying to do. So I'm thinking hopefully they've analysed everything, they'll go into the game at the weekend, and if they do go in the same shape, that 4-2-3-1, then everything just needs to be a lot more tighter, closer together, dropping behind the ball, maybe dropping into like a low block in their own half, and just hoping to get those transitions, which I think you can get against Celtic. And actually the times we turned it over, with Molotnikov and Boyle, we were actually like fairly dangerous on the break. Like we got ourselves into good positions. Now, don't get me wrong, the final ball and some other stuff wasn't great, and not registering a shot on target wasn't great. But I do think that, you know, there was positives to maybe pull from that. And I suppose the other question that I posed was, do we then maybe change to 3-5-2, which can maybe offer something a little bit different against them, especially away from home?
Yeah. Just, I'll ask you about the potential for moving to the 3 in a minute, but I think just a point maybe, like, I think going to Celtic Park, I think the natural instinct almost when you go away to like a Celtic Park rivals is probably to drop deeper anyway. I think there's probably, when you're at home, there is maybe that expectation to play a bit higher, to try and play a bit more on the front foot, which doesn't really tend to apply as much. And I think, again, it's still going to be really difficult for Hibs to deal with. But I think, or do you think, even if, you know, if they do then drop that wee bit deeper, obviously you'd think the likes of Hatate and O'Reilly will try and pick up those spaces. You could see how Kyogo was trying to, when they did move up and a bit wider, he was then dropping in. So I mean, if you sit then a bit deeper, does that potentially deny them those kind of they'll still try and pick up the positions, but not so much space for them to then get on the ball, and then you can then say like, well, okay, you can play in front of us a bit more, try and break us down that way, because it was kind of too easy for them to get in, you know, through the lines, if you like. So I mean, does that maybe naturally happen if you go to Celtic Park?
I think so. I mean, you know, there's a game where we tried to go to Celtic Park and do the opposite of that, and you know, that didn't go so well. A game we try not to talk about, but I think you're right. I think the teams want to have a go. There is a thing about going out and having a go against Celtic and Rangers and Hearts and all these things. But when you're in those like bigger matches, there's, you do have to, you can do that, but there's also, you have to be a little bit pragmatic in there as well. And I just thought on Sunday, without that early goal going in, I would have been really intrigued to see what we would have looked like, because I just think it kind of started to fall apart. And as I said, we kind of pushed up to kind of press the centre halves, but the gap between the forwards it was just too big, and it just had no spaces to go into. And again, like I said before, and I suppose from tactical point of view, and anytime you put tactics in, it's, you're saying, right, we'll do A and B, but C is still going to be a problem, and it's just how you deal with that. So yeah, if they do drop deeper and they sit and they say, right, Scales, Carter Vickers, you can stay on the ball. We're going to kind of half press you. We're going to man mark Callum McGregor, and then we're just kind of going to go man for man across the rest of that and just try and stay tight. You can go around the outside of us, and then we'll deal with stuff in the box. Like, that's essentially what you might have to do. You might have to do that, and you hope that you frustrate them. There's no goals going in, and then as they get further up and things get squashed together, if you turn over the ball and you've got Boyle, or you've got maybe Bowie and a bit of pace there, Molotnikov as well, who I thought did really well, then you can break, and that's your opportunity to score. The other thing on Sunday is, we generated quite a lot of free kicks because of that, because Celtic like push up a bit and then you can turn the ball over, then they'll bring you down. And I actually thought our set pieces were like really disappointing. Crosses went straight out the pitch, free kicks out, throw-ins were too easily turned over, like you highlighted in your piece, like Neil picking up and throwing it as Obita went to get it. Like, you just can't be disorganised like that against like Celtic or Rangers and Hearts, and you have to be, you have to follow your plan and follow what you're going to do, because the opportunities are few and far between. So, I can imagine us playing a lot deeper, depending on the shape, regardless, of the shape. And I would hope that this week, set pieces, there's been, maybe a bit more work on that, because they often become a huge part against those teams.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point there. Against teams like Celtic, you can think that you've done something to solve problem A or problem B, but then they find a way to turn that into problem C. And it's about so much of you can go out with, a really well-drilled game plan, but I think on top of that, obviously you need the well-drilled game plan, but it's about finding your then solutions during the game to different situations. Because I think maybe the first goal last Sunday, maybe an example of that, because I didn't necessarily mind what Jonio was trying to do there, because he's pressed up, he's forced O'Reilly into the mistake. The crowd reacts to that. He then goes after the ball. He wants to keep the tempo high. He'll know better than anybody. Like, these games at Easter Road, you've got to start quickly against Celtic. You want to get the crowd on your side. But then when a kind of situation like that arises, he's gone out of position. He's thrown the ball to Kukarevich, who has absolutely you can't give that ball away there. It's got to stick. And it's like situations like that then arise. It'll beat us maybe out of position. I think he's actually ran over. He's reacted to Newell almost. He's ran over, maybe thinking that Newell was going to pick the ball up and throw it to him to then take the throw in. So it's just things like that arise in game that are not part of, probably an unusual situation in a way. Do you know what I mean? Not part of your kind of tactical plan, and it's then how you adapt to that. And obviously Hibs didn't do it well enough in that instance, and they will have to do so if they're going to get anything on Sunday. So just moving on, you mentioned the potential to switch potentially to a 3-5-2. What would be the thinking there? What could that potentially offer?
Again, I think I said in my videos that it's not a foolproof plan, and there is allowances you've got to make for it. But that shape, the three at the back, you've got an extra body there. So, in theory, if Kyogo drops into the middle of the park, within reason, the other centre halves can then just close the space in behind, and the centre half can go with them. And in some cases, O'Hora and Ekpitera, they weren't going to run into the middle of the park with them, because the ball was just going to then get played right through. So it gives you that extra coverage there. Plus, the left and the right centre back are then in. When we talked about O'Reilly and Hatate picking up those awkward positions, like the little half spaces in between, you've got your right centre back, left centre back who are in those positions. that can take a man on, so they can, Newell can pass a man on and it can be picked up probably more easily. Obviously, your wing backs can negate the wingers. If the wingers pin, you've got wing backs there to deal with. And then, the midfield setup is quite similar. You've probably still got your three across the middle set up how they were before. I can imagine us just kind of going man for man in there, I would think we would do. And then your two forward players, when teams have done well against Celtic in the past has been that, as I said, one looks to try and cover the ball or cover the centre half on the ball. The other one would be McGregor, and they would just sort of like switch and pivot off that. So you are allowing the centre halves on the ball, and we know that Scales and Carter Vickers have got quality, but it's it's making allowances. Would you rather they're on the ball, carrying it forward, or would you rather it's zooming past you and going into Kyogo's feet? So it's kind of, and that's where, and listen, even if we did manage that, and it's still a huge amount of concentration, a huge amount of effort, passing players on, rotating, covering. If somebody, like your example there, Newell runs forward to take the ball, I think if he does that and you've got a more experienced number 6, maybe who is in beside him, not like a Campbell, they probably call Obita in and they stop and they set things up very quickly. So it is difficult. You need the right personnel in there, and I suppose and at the moment in terms of people's fitness, we don't know where. I don't quite know where everybody is at the moment. We've got wide players like Molotnikov and Boyle and things. You would have to, David Gray and the team would have to think about the personnel and who they'd want to play where and things like that. It's not quite an easy fit. Centre half wise, there's a question, a big question. Does Rocky come in there? Do you play Jordan Obita at left centre back? Do you play Lewis Miller in at right centre back? I think Miller's actually had some pretty, in the first 2 games where things haven't gone so well, he's had quite good moments in there in terms of his attacking play. Is he disciplined enough to play right centre back? Would you prefer him at right wing back? It's all these questions that David Gray has to mull over and make ahead of Sunday. But he looks like he wanted to play a 3-5-2 earlier on in the season. He started off with that, and obviously Cadden's injury and the recruitment taking a bit of time has maybe stopped that a little bit. So I'm really intrigued to see if we see that again, and if we see it on Sunday.
Yeah. So just I kind of anticipating that there probably will be some sort of change to midfield. I don't know if we'll see again what Gray went with on Sunday. What do you think would be the best combination in there for this game? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's really difficult. I think I'm sure I can already hear fans shouting when I say what I'm about to say, but you can imagine it being Newell, Levitt and Campbell. And I think that frustrates people, and it probably frustrates people just from the recruitment side of things and maybe thinking that combination doesn't work and isn't successful. Now with the additions that we're making, that, there's more competition for places in there. I mean, I think if we were playing any other team, Kwon would be in. I think he would start.
Yeah.
But without that, I could see him going Newell, Levitt, Campbell. I think it was the real Dave on Twitter said, I was talking about some of my tweets after about Molotnikov, when he had that little cameo spot in the number 10 role behind the striker. He actually played really well, had some nice link-up play. He might be tempted to put him in ahead of maybe Campbell or something like that. But I've just got a feeling that away from home, he'll want to kind of try and stick to players who have been in that situation before, especially if we're going to maybe put in, a Nicky Cadden, for example, or Bowie starts, we won't, and we're having to make a change at the back. I think you want to minimise too much disruption, because you certainly don't want to go into the game, especially only having a small, like a week's recovery and stuff like that. You don't want to go too experimental. So I think it'll be Newell, Levitt and Campbell, but Newell and Levitt deepest and Campbell in the sort of number 10 role.
Yeah, I mean,
striker wise, I think Bowie probably will start. And I would like that. And I think that if he's fit and able to start, I think that would be good. And then I think even though he's had a really sort of slow start and it has been a bit disappointing, Martin Boyle, I think in a game like that, when you're going to rely on a counter attack, he's the only option we've got at the moment without Eli Yuan and stuff like that. So I think maybe a front two of Boyle and Bowie, maybe.
Yep. Well, there we go. Craig's put his neck on the line for Sunday. So we don't know. We'll see how it pans out over the weekend. But I mean, it's. Do you subscribe to the? I know it's a cup game. It is kind of straight knockout, so you'd be out of the competition. But with the way things are going, do you subscribe to the old free hit cliche? Or do you think this is, even if not, is there pressure on for more of a performance, if not an expectation to go there and get a result? Because I think Hibs need to, at some point, there needs to be some sort of spark to try and get things going. I know, like David Gray talked about short-term pain for long-term gain, and I see where he's coming from there, because there's been a lot of changes to the squad. Guys who have come in are at different stages of fitness. It's not quite where he wants to be, but I think going in, if we're going to look ahead a wee bit, it's a big game against Dundee coming up the following week. So I do feel that sort of spark has to come from somewhere, even if it is just, a positive performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, in terms of where we are, it is a free hit in terms of currently where our squad is and things like that. I think like you say, the game against Dundee, and I think who are we playing after Dundee? Is it maybe Motherwell? I can't remember.
The fixture list.
It's two games that I think are almost become like the 6 pointers. Really, you want to get 6 points from them, especially with the start against St Mirren. So. I think you're right. I think it's got to be a performance. People know that there's players training in the background, and Gray's mentioned it, and that they're building up their fitness. And so I think the fans are accepting that it's going to take a bit of time to get this squad up and running. But we need to pick up points, and we need results more than anything. And it probably does start if you go away from home and you can put in a positive performance against Celtic. You never know. You never know. As I said to you, the first 20 minutes, I was pretty fearful of where that game was going. And, as it progressed, and as I say, we started to do a little bit better. We started to turn the ball over. I don't think Celtic were any in particular danger at too many places, but you can see we got in, roughed up, we hit the bar. We had some other chatting, Martin Boyle running through and not hitting the target with a shot. And we started to just create a little bit more. So that should fill them with a little bit of positivity going into it. And, the Celtic got beat at this stage in the competition last year. So you just never know. But I certainly think it has to be a good performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we finish up, we've had a couple of questions coming in the comments about Jake Doyle-Hayes and when he might be back. We don't have a definitive date on that at the moment. We have seen that he's been involved in training at various points, and I believe Hibs have just been pretty careful with his progression, given what he's been through in terms of that injury over the past year. So hopefully we'll see him back involved in some capacity before too long. But we're going to leave it there. We've just had somebody come in with a fixture list at the bottom. It's away at Kilmarnock is after this game.
So that is two very big games.
Yeah, away to Kilmarnock and then home to St Johnstone. So it's kind of, I think when you're looking at the fixture list, it's those first, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, you're into the middle of September before Hibs play a team that finished outside of the top 6 last season. So it has been a tough start, and I think that maybe just reinforces the point about needing to get that spark to get the season going from somewhere. So obviously the search for that begins on Sunday at Celtic Park. But we're going to leave it there for just now, folks. Thank you very much for joining us. We've seen a nice uptake on our current offer on the Hibs Observer. You can see it on the ticker below there. Subscribe to the Hibs Observer for £12 for 12 months. That's full access to all our content. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching on there as well. But thanks, Craig. Thanks as always for joining us, and thanks to everybody who's been tuning in. Enjoy the game this weekend, wherever you're watching it, and we'll speak to you again very, very soon. Cheers.
Thank you.